to cover the COVID-19 costs and things like that. So yeah, very, very surprised and very pleased, of course, that there were no tax hikes. There were of course some tight, yeah, but sorry.
Yes, I think, what is absolutely important to understand is where we are as an economy, and we know the damage that the economy has suffered even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously it got worse. And, the prophets of doom obviously were forecasting a very, very gloomy budget this time around. But it does appear as if the finance minister has done some balancing tricks.
Yes, he has, but I think what was also what was also not expected is that SARS actually collected more money than they expected. So they were forecasting roughly a 380 billion rand shortfall, and it's down to 200 billion. So there's a lot more personal taxes collected, and also from commodities, mines, etc. The mines were doing really well, so there's higher taxes collected by SARS, and that allowed them a little bit of leeway. But yes, there is still a big deficit on the budget, which we understand will be funded by loans. So yeah, and that further weakens the budget. We still have high unemployment. There seems to be a little drive to get that right. Training of people, getting upskill them so they can at least get work. So yeah, from that point of view, we still, the outlook is still relatively weak for us. Yeah.
Yes. Obviously, in terms of the increased revenue and the better collections that SARS had achieved. And we've seen the message come out very, very strongly in the budget speech, where allocating a further 3 billion to basically strengthen the collection drive and to make absolutely sure that, you've got the right people for the job in terms of collections. So it does appear as if the government or the finance minister has identified this specific area as an area of opportunity.
Yes, yeah, and that I must say is a welcome surprise to see that 3 billion rand allocated to SARS. It's aimed at improving their systems, and most of us would have experienced, if you've got a small business, problems and frustrations with SARS filing returns now. The flash player was abolished and things like that. So this is mainly aimed at that, improving their systems to get more third-party information. So they specifically mentioned that for the higher earners or the more wealthy people, they will go to third parties. So build up their system to be able to collect more information to see that you actually adequately declare all your income. So yeah, I think that is a good thing. SARS needed that money. Their development in the IT system, which is critical in the times we're in, has not kept up, and they really need that money to do that. So that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Well, Pete, just thinking, in the future, because, we are talking about systems and we are talking about improving on the systems. And we know at this point in time, the issues surrounding wealth tax and the wealthier individuals were not targeted or were not taxed. But is there possibly something coming into the future? Because this is the reason why you would want to ramp your system so that, third-party information and the like as well. So it's not something that we can say, is basically a done deal where, he's basically decided that, wealthier people or the wealth tax is not coming. It could still come in the future.
It could still come, but what the minister said, which was also surprising, in the medium-term budget, so last year, October still, you were saying that we need over the next 3 years to increase the taxes by 40 billion rand, which obviously, and this is where the other tax, like the wealth tax, etc., would have contributed to that. And he specifically categorically said yesterday that they're not going to do that. So they're not going to increase tax rates. He also said that for companies, they will reduce the tax rate to 27%. Of course, that's only two years away. So with that as a background, and I think with their expectation of the growth and the recovery, it is possible that the wealth tax is not going to be that high on the priority list or list of priorities for them, but it is not. You're absolutely right. So we have to now start paying back these loans that we've incurred to get COVID-19 and funding of those things, funding the economy, the further relief measures there. So it is possible that will come back onto agenda, and it's not going to disappear, I think.
Yes, but what was obviously expected were the other forms of taxes. For instance, the fuel levy. We're
Yes.
looking at obviously the sin taxes on liquor,
Mm.
on cigarettes. That was expected, Pete.
Yes, that was expected, and I personally believe that the increases are lower than what we expected. You know, the fuel levy, we look at 15% on fuel and 11 cents, so 27 cents on the fuel levy and the road accident fund increase. The other is at 8%, so the sin taxes is relatively high. They're talking of introducing a tax on electronic cigarettes and things like that. So, yeah, so they're looking at the sin taxes, and as you're absolutely right, we all expected that. You know, somebody said yesterday when we were listening that with what we saw with alcohol abuse over weekends and the pressure on the hospitals, one would have expected that to actually be slightly higher. So I think modest. It's more than inflation at 8%, but yes, it was absolutely expected that they will increase those taxes.
Pete, just looking at it from a taxpayer's perspective and looking at this budget, and obviously there were certain messages that came through very, very strongly. Firstly, with the ramping up of, spending 3 billion rand for SARS to basically ramp up the system. And we are going to see SARS, obviously, once they've got the systems in place, are going to become a lot more aggressive in terms
Yes,
of collections, in terms of those that default, in terms of action being
yeah,
taken. And we've seen this happen in the last year, where we see a lot more that is happening, a lot of activity in that space that is taking place in SARS. So there are certain warning signals for taxpayers, particularly those who don't have their tax affairs in order and those who have defaulted.
that's right. Yeah. So the commissioner, Edward Kieswetter, I was at when we spoke together yesterday afternoon, and he also referred to that. So the minister had said he will introduce penalties for employers that miss their mid-year reconciliation submission. So we absolutely see this, and they mentioned that we must ensure that our collections are better. They're talking about there's looking at anti-avoidance, moving assets between trusts and things like that. So definitely beefing up, and that with that information drive, getting information from third parties. Yeah, definitely, we can expect pressure from SARS. You can expect if you don't properly declare your income that you will be in trouble with SARS. Yeah.
Yes, and just what sort of advice would you give taxpayers now that we know what is coming?
Well, there's very little indication very little proposals that they'll change to tax legislation. So it's in a sense, there's no major changes to the taxes, to the way we've done things. But going forward, you've got the relief is away on the COVID-19 for provisional tax payments. It's due tomorrow. Those are the last ones that we'll have there. So you must put in. They've made it a criminal offence if you don't put in a provisional tax return. Put in your returns on time. If you are an employer or other third party that must give information to SARS, absolutely be diligent about that. Get those information in. Make sure that they're correct. As is required by the law. So it's from our side. One must be compliant and clear your income. That in terms of the legislation you are supposed to do.
Well, Pete, thank you very much for that and for your time with us this morning here on Salam Media on News and Views. All the best to you. Take care.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Piet Nel from the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants with us this morning, just looking at the budget speech from a tax perspective. We're going to go for a break. We'll be joined by SAFTU's General Secretary, Zwelinzima Vavi, looking at the South African Federation of Trade Unions who march in Cape Town in response to a number of economic problems that the country is faced with.